Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me on another of my interviews. Today we're going to find out if England really exists. There is a rumour going round that it doesn't, which is a little bit bizarre, you might think. We'll find out. My guest today is Jason Noble, who is an entrepreneur, and I've scribbled down here an all-round rogue, it seems to me. We will find out exactly why. Jason, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. I hope you didn't mind me calling you an all-round rogue, but I feel like I'm in the same boat. We seem to be questioning what is going on, which is sort of against the grain, really, for the governments and many people who've been indoctrinated in certain things. England doesn't exist, you tell me. Let's go into that in a second. Could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into why England doesn't exist?
Sure. Nice to be on.
Thank you.
Big fan of all the stuff you've been doing. It's an interesting start to the interview. I wouldn't say I'm a rogue, certainly a rebel
A
to
rebel,
a
yes.
bunch of stuff that I'm not particularly happy with being told what to do by people on a regular basis. My background, I've been involved in running my own businesses since I was at school. I used to run one of the largest event security companies many years ago. I moved into telecoms and a whole bunch of bits and pieces. For about the last 20 years, I've been involved in various different ways in investment finance, from sort of private equity to offshore advising, and a bunch of bits and pieces. And about probably 6 years ago now, I started to sort of question the training that I'd had, because I was looking into creating a private currency for a community that I'd been building. And I'd started looking into blockchain and how that all worked. And it sort of led me down a path of looking into the banks and the way that currency sets up. And I realized that pretty much everything I'd been told within the financial space was completely rubbish. I just had to relearn everything, and just came to the conclusion that there was a bunch of things that just weren't as we were told, like that money doesn't technically exist in the way that we see it, and that the banks don't actually have the ability to give people their monies back, which was a big problem for me. And I started to tell people about it, and many people, you're nuts, it's never going to happen. And nowadays, many people just go, well, which one's going to go next, and when's the big crash going to happen? And then 2020 came around, and I think it's changed a lot of people in lots of ways. So it's sort of led me down a path of being involved in creating a series of organizations trying to find ways to understand better what's going on, which has then led me to doing some research into what a country is or should be, or who defines that. And we, in the research, discovered that England doesn't really fit the criteria of what countries they've collectively got together and decided a country is.
How strange. I mean, that most peculiar, that a country, again, going back to what you were saying about just everything being turned on its head. That, I mean, I've been going on this journey myself over and putting it out onto YouTube, and in recent times, as people will know, I've sort of had the little ban where you're suspended for 7 days for trying to sort of explore what's going on and trying to find the right thing. And it does test you, doesn't it, when the things you have been grown up with all your life have suddenly melted away. And through many of my guests, about freedom, about what the law is and legislation, and you're talking about banks, and most people have assumed that you put the money in the bank and it's their money, it sits in a shoebox somewhere, and when they want it back, they can just say, oh, can you go and get my shoebox with my name on it? It should be there. And yet the banks work completely differently to that. And it's quite surprising. And only the other day, a friend of mine was complaining. He went to the bank, and he's just moving house. He wanted some ready cash, about 5 or 6 grand. He wanted to pay a few people for various things, and it was half an hour inquisition about what he wanted to do with the money, why he was taking it out of the bank in cash. And he thought, hang on a minute, this is my money. You've had the use of it. you're sitting there and on all of the rest of it. It's been in there. You've had nice use of it. I just want it back now. Thanks very much. And that was the last thing he expected. And it's a bit of a worry. And as you say, now we're coming into a very critical time where banks are under threat. And we've heard about these digital banks, the central bank digital currencies. So much is upside down. And now you're telling me that even England is under question. So tell me more about that, because that is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of there's been a long road to realizing that there are challenges that we had to look into, and I mean, I discovered that, for example, when you put money into a bank, that it isn't actually your money; it belongs to the bank. It doesn't belong to you. The bank owes you the money back. And they sort of they hide that in lots of clever ways. I also discovered that banks don't lend money. You think they lend you money, but actually they don't. You on paper lend them the money that they lend back to you. So there's a lot of clever tricks going on. And when you start to realize any one of these things, it leads you to a place where you go, well, if that's wrong, then what else is wrong?
Yeah.
And I sort of in 2020, I'd got locked down in Spain, and it was quite a harsh lockdown over there. I nearly got arrested for walking to the local shop, and I'd gone over there for 10 days and got stranded in a house for the best part of 5 months and couldn't leave. And I sort of was sort of looking around trying to find anybody that still had any common sense, because I just didn't make any sense to me. How could I get arrested to walk into the shop? There was no one on the street. I mean, there was so many cats on the street in Spain at the time because there was just nobody about. It was bizarre. But my brain's going, well, there's nobody out here, and I'm going to kill someone walking to this shop when there's nobody here.
Mm.
It just didn't make any sense. So I sort of actually gone onto Facebook and created a group called Common Sense, and I was trying to find anybody with some. And it was very, I got banned on Facebook, which bothered me. And I'd actually been looking into the likes of Google and Facebook as well for various other reasons. But I'd come to the conclusion that we were sort of very monitored and watched on all of that stuff. And I've been creating a community, which is why I led me down this path of creating this currency that was aimed at not censoring people in the way that I knew I was being censored on the likes of Google and I found out on Facebook. And this sort of led me down a path of creating an entity called the Awareness Foundation. That was really a sort of a problem solution thing. There were so many things flying around in 2020 that nobody really understood. And so I started with the banking thing, but then started reading other things and went, did you know this problem? And here's the solution, because it's all well and good going, the banks are going to blow up, but then what do you do about it? Now that sort of really matured into where we are today, where I was sort of thinking we need to get all of the people that are trying to do something about this together to work together, because I looked at it and went, our numbers are our greatest strength. For me, that's been the big thing that's been apparent to me, is that there's a number of people that are now gone, something's not right in 2020 at various different levels.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of training, and I meet people that are just cotton onto it. I know people that have been aware of all of these things for like 20, 30 years, though I have no idea how they haven't gone insane in that time. But, there are people at varying different levels going, we need to do something. And there are some people, and you've had some really great people on your show saying, right, this is how to challenge council tax. This is how to challenge the names you put on me, all sorts of things. But the problem you've got is all these people are doing all these different things, but we're not really stopping what is the problem in its tracks. And for me, I'm quite a solutions-based person. I look at it and sort of say, if the building's on fire, where did the fire start? How do I put that out? And then I'll work out how to fix the building later. And I'm just looking at it going, they're getting worse and worse. Although COVID sort of has, in theory, gone to, I shouldn't have said that word, should I?
It's all right. I think one can say the word. I mean, it's the connotation. I think I'm not sure.
Sorry, just aware of the fact that you've had a few runs
Yeah.
with thingy, but that thing has been sort of put to the back burner, and now we're replaced with the cost of living crisis and the Ukraine war and varying different stories and bits and pieces that lead a bunch of other people to get distracted, whilst things like the cost of living is going mad, because they've been printing money at sort of obscene amounts of money in the last couple of years, which is something I've been talking about for the last 5 years. Now, the issue with that is that all of those things are making people's existence a little bit more tough.
Mm.
Each day it's different things. Utility costs have gone up, and a whole bunch of things. And I sort of were saying to people, look, this work together. Back in 2020, I was doing this, and I got banned from a bunch of different groups, sort of for even daring to suggest that we work together, which I sort of found very frustrating. And I'd gone at the time a little bit off sort of track and went, okay, I'm a bit fed up with trying to fight this because you're almost fighting against the people that are fighting it.
Yeah.
And went, okay, we need to do something different. And I personally took a decision. I was going to try and go and find an island and create a country and just go and hide away until the world come back to normal.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people would love to do the same.
somewhere a bit warmer than England.
Yes.
But then I bumped into a now friend of mine who basically had registered a company on Company's House, well, I'm sure we'll lead on to, that basically went, okay, well, if you do that, how are you going to protect your home, as in this piece of land that we hang around on?
Mm.
And he sort of made me feel a bit guilty and sort of went, okay, there's a lot of problems here. And if we go off and hide away, well, you won't really have the right to have a say of what's happening on this piece of land. So we started doing some real digging into it. And we were trying to work out what I'd been looking into. How do you create a country? Searching around for it. And when you do it, it's actually very difficult to get a piece of land anymore because they're all owned by someone in theory. And you can't buy the land off of someone and say, okay, well, I've now got a piece of land, I'll buy a country, because they don't sell you the land, they sell you the rights to the land, the freehold. And people often think that freehold means it's yours. It's not. You're just free to hold it. It belongs to someone else.
Right.
And when we started looking into, what actually defines a country, we stumbled across a thing that actually happened in 1933 in Montevideo, where an agreement was made between all of the countries at the time as to what really defines a country. And the sort of the aspects of it were that you needed to have a population, you needed to have a landmass, you needed to have a sort of a set of rules, a constitution, if you like, a government, a leader, and the identification from another country that you are a country. So if you had all of these key things, they would say, okay, that gives you the right to say you're a country, and then maybe you can go on the list of the UN, for example. Not that we particularly want to do that, but the definitions of these things, we started looking at it and said, okay, well, at the time, Nicola Sturgeon was the leader of Scotland and Holyrood in Scotland. You got Mark Dreyfus in Wales, and Wales is not actually defined as a country by England, believe it or not, because it's a principality. It's the Prince of Wales, and it's a part of England, even though England technically doesn't exist. And Wales actually has a leader and a parliament. Now, when we started looking into, well, where's the leader in the Parliament of England, we went, well, there's a British Prime Minister and there's a British Parliament, but there is no English Parliament. There is no English Prime Minister or leader. And when you actually look at it, the United Kingdom and Great Britain, which often people think is the sort of the over one of all of it, also doesn't exist, because if you actually look at the entities that make up the government of the United Kingdom, when you start looking into those, you'll find out that they are organizations, corporations, no different from Tesco's, which I think you've covered many times. Now, when you start looking into who owns what of those corporations, you can do searches on things like Dun& Bradstreet. And if you look on there, you'll find that things like the Treasury, for example, which is the money till of United Kingdom, Great Britain, England, whichever you call it, is actually owned by a corporation called the Prime Minister's Office. Not by the United Kingdom or Great Britain. And so they don't even set it up in the way that we perceive it is, even as corporations. So when we looked at it, we actually realized that of the five, six things that they think you should have as a country, England was missing 3 of the 5 or 6 key things. And then we looked into sort of some historical points. There's this belief system that England or the United Kingdom has to have one leader, one king, one government. But actually, when you look at it back and you go back to the times when England did exist, there was actually around about 20 different jurisdictions inside of England. There was actually a republic and many kingdoms all at the same time. And so this modern day thing that we have one king, queen, and a government that sort of, in theory, we put there, is quite a recent thing.
So
Um,
are we going back to I was because I was going to say, I mean, surely we did have in England, and you just said it did exist in the days of King Alfred, and then Athelstan. I think it was Athelstan who sort of embraced everything in England, if
Yeah,
my
I mean, we sort of. I'm not a historian, so I'm probably the last person to explain it in great detail. But when you look at it, there are many things that we have in our modern day sort of setup
yes,
that are factually what we believe has been there forever and a day. Like, for example, I mean, we're recording this on St. George's Day, which is ironically our birthday. We created an entity a year ago, specifically on St. George's Day, to highlight the fact that St. George's Day was put in place to replace what was the original patron saint of England's day, which was a guy called St. Edmund, which was the King of Norfolk, who was the last known king of England to be killed defending England from foreign invaders, which were the Vikings.
right.
Uh, and Norfolk was a kingdom in its own right. At that time, the Vikings came in and they created a republic up in Yorkshire. So you actually had, republics and kingdoms at the same time on this piece of land that we know as England. So it's not really what we've been told. And if you actually look into history of our flag and our sort of patron saint's day, everything has changed. St. George killed a dragon, but most people, if you ask them, would never know what the dragon is. Ironically, the original flag of England and the flag that the English army carried into battle in 900 and something or other was a red flag with a white dragon on it. And that's the dragon that St. George killed. So it's not what everybody's been told.
Yes, so more and more manipulation. But as you say, I mean, it's fascinating that we have these corporations that now are governing. They're sort of sitting on the land, but they have really not the power or the what's the word I'm looking for, the gravitas that would be that should be England, that's come up from those early days. That they're sort of, again, it's sort of sitting on it, but not it. I'm trying. I'm
Absolutely.
trying to find the right words to grasp what you've just been saying. That they're not. It's like, I suppose, the plastic wrapper around the object. You know, they're there as the plastic wrapper. The object is the England, and these things that we think are the essentials of England are really just this thing that's been cheated, if you like. They're pretending that it's that part of England. Yeah, it's not at all.
Well,
Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean,
Probably not.
you fundamentally, again, if you go back to looking at what is a country, you've got to go, okay, well, how do you end up with people running the country? What rules do you put in place? And there's generally two. There's sort of republicanism or a kingdom. Now we have ultimately a kingdom in the United Kingdom with a proclaimed king. I mean, he's not even the king. He hasn't taken any oath. He's just decided he's the king. He proclaimed it a few weeks ago, and everyone's gone along with it.
Mm.
So he's also the king of a sovereign who didn't take the correct oath that, in theory, according to their rules, she was supposed to take to make her correct sovereign. So there's a whole constitutional problem there, because ultimately a constitutional monarchy, which is what we have in the United Kingdom, is supposed to follow a set of rules. That's the whole point about a constitutional thing. You have a set of rules. This comes back to the country thing. And if you look at somewhere like America, which was set up as a constitutional republic, again, it's supposed to be a set of rules that people follow. Not that the government make the rules, but the people make the rules that the government follow. And we've got off a track completely. It's gone from the people creating these things and them. You delegate power to somebody going, "Could you build me a road?" And they go,
Mm.
"Okay, I'll go off and do it." They don't then come back and tell you what to do. It's the other way around. We've gone, "Please, can you build us a road?" And whether you have a kingdom or whether you have a republic is sort of scenario. You actually are supposed to have the people deciding the rules because the people put them in power. And one of the things that we've done a lot of work on in what we've been structuring is sort of like a re-education process, which is actually re-educating about the background to the story, but also understanding what these things mean, because many people think that a republic is the same as a kingdom, but you just have a president rather than a king. But actually, the whole thing is supposed to start with the people putting them into power, and that then comes back to where do you get that from? And that can come from religious beliefs. Religion. If you read books of religion, they say, God created the place and gave it to the people, and then the people create a government. So where do you stand in that pecking order? But when you start creating corporations, which is a thing that was man-made, and saying that corporation is in control of you and you must do as that corporation says, then you've got to look at the rules of corporation. So if, for example, you look at their rules, there is a Companies Act in the UK, and the Companies Act defines how a company is supposed to behave. But yet they go, well, we're not a company when it suits. So they just tell you what to do and ignore the rules.
Mm.
The reality is that there have been court cases, and there was a really famous one in America in 1942, I think it was, called the Clearfield Doctrine. And in it, it basically says that any government of a sovereign government actually loses its power the minute it behaves as a corporation. So it is defined that corporations have no power. You cannot be that way because you're supposed to be a representation of the people. The minute you become Tesco's and Tesco starts telling you need to give you your tax, well,
Mm.
then it's a different bunch of rules. There requires contracts, there requires laws and rules that you're supposed to follow. They don't follow these things, and so it's become completely up about sort of face. And
Is that connected to the concept that when you have a corporation, it's a dead entity. It's not people. I mean, people have to run the corporation. It has to employ people to do the stuff. But in and of itself, it's just a by default a sort of an entity with no life.
yeah, it's a building. You can't talk to a building. So
Yeah.
somebody in the building has to take responsibility. So I did a recent request to the sort of a freedom of information request asking in a regulated company, because I've been challenging the banks to prove that you actually lend any money. It's quite an interesting challenge when you go into the courts because they don't want you to be right, but technically speaking, they don't lend money. So I did a freedom of information request and said to them who in a regulated entity, an FCA regulated entity, is the responsible party. And they said for anything other than board decisions, it's the CEO. So it's called vicarious liability. The person at the top of a company has the responsibility for everyone that sort of falls below them. And they are ultimately responsible for that decision making. But the decision making must be in line with what they are. And if you're a corporation, then you have to follow the rules of commercial business. And one of those rules is the Companies Act. And if you ignore it, then you fundamentally breaking the law. And the law states that ignorance of the law isn't no excuse. You can't say I didn't know or it doesn't apply to me, because you've got to justify why it doesn't apply to you, not just your opinion. And we currently have a scenario in the United Kingdom where everyone just does as they're told because they never go why.
Mm.
Where if we all just stopped and went why, actually they wouldn't have the answer. And I often sort of have conversations with people and just say, look, you need to be holding the person that's in that corporation accountable for what they say. They say, you must give me money. Now, the stupid thing is that actually they don't actually bully us as much as we think they do sometimes. So, for example, if you look at something like tax, the government don't often send you tax bills. Sometimes they do, not always. But we send them something like saying, I think I owe you this money. So you volunteer the situation, not the other way around. They don't come to you and say, you owe us this money. You go to them and say, I think I owe you this money. Because they say, if you don't tell us what you've been doing, then we will scare you with this other piece of paper over here. So we
Yes.
actually walk into what is basically legal entrapment. We are being legally trapped to answer questions that we're not obliged to answer.
It's fascinating. So with England technically not existing, being run by a corporation which is against the law, what's the answer? I mean, as people become aware of this and think, hang on, well, we can't go on. Once you know something, once you wake up in any of these things, you can't just go back. Oh well, it doesn't matter. We'll just carry on, put the kettle on, have a cup of tea. It will start to niggle at people that this isn't right. We need to do something. So how do you rectify what's happened to us and make it legitimate?
I had a conversation with Anna de Busseret probably about 18 months ago, where she sort of, and if you don't know her, she's a sort of a lawyer. She's very, very good, and she understands constitutional sort of law very, very well. And technically, she was right about everything she said. At the time, she was saying, look, there are rules to protect us. And on paper, there are things like the Magna Carta of 1215 that was created in theory to police the rules that then get made. But all of that stuff has been sort of thrown out the window. I believe we now live in a lawless society. We have courts that aren't using juries. There are sort of just administration processes. And half the time, they don't even go to court. They just tell you it's happened and you've lost.
Mm.
That's not any form of justice. And the judiciary and the executive are supposed to be completely separate. So, what do you do when you live in a lawless society? You've got to sometimes go, okay, well, if you had a scenario where people were rioting on the streets outside and you think, okay, well, the police aren't going to come, what would I do? You'd sort of batten down your door and protect your little bit of space. So we've sort of myself and a group of other people have sort of looked at that and said, okay, we need to do something about it. And we've come to the conclusion that asking the people telling us what to do is a waste of time. If we
Yes.
go to them and say, look, can you stop doing that? They just go, no, we don't, we're not listening. We're going to do it anyway. And you only have to look at things like the ULEZ that's creeping in London, where it's out to the M25 now. Sadiq Khan's been told by a number of different people, A, that they don't want it, but B, that there's no evidence that it actually saves anything in the environment. I mean, the only information that comes out is actually provided by the GLA. So it's like them going, we've decided we've saved everybody, and there's the proof. Where's the scientific proof? Even the car companies, if you actually go to them and ask them to prove what goes on, the car companies can't prove that the charging of money is going to save anybody in the environment. They can't even provide the evidence of the emissions. But that's another day. But the reality is, if you go to these people and say, look, we don't agree with what you're suggesting, they generally don't want to hear it. If you go to their court system and say, we want remedy for this stuff, the court system generally favors that stuff for varying different reasons. So the only real way to stop it is to say, well, okay, I understand what you're asking me to do, but until you prove to me that I have to do it, not that you tell me I have to do it, but why I have to do it, we're going to sort of do our own thing. So myself and a group of other people, literally a year ago today, decided, based upon Craig, who I mentioned earlier, had sort of created a name called the Republic of England. And I sort of laughed at the time because he'd registered it on Companies House and sort of went, it's probably giving it away if you put it onto Companies House. But we've actually formed a collective of people that are following the rules of what countries believe a country should be. We believe we've reinvented England a year ago today. We've proclaimed ourselves to be in existence. No one's objected to us, and we've actually been around the country twice explaining to people about it and about the concept of what we're trying to do. And ultimately, where we stand right now is we believe that the piece of land that we stand on belongs to everyone, and that anyone that turns around and says it's theirs and that they have the right to tell us what to do really needs to back up that claim. We're not saying they can't be here and they can't play their silly games and wear their silly outfits, but that's all it is. It's them pretending to be something. It's called barratry. That's the official term for it. It's
Barratry.
yeah, it's somebody that decides that they are more official than you, your
Yes.
Royal Highness, or I'm wearing a clown's outfit with a big hat and I'm going to tell you what to do. Well, if you're going to tell me what to do, you need to tell me why I need to follow it. And that's not because I'm just being belligerent. It's just simply, if you're going to say I have to, I'm willing to believe them.
Mm.
I'd like to see the proof. And that includes things like I'd like to know who owns the land that they claim we have to register on Companies House and the land registry for buying things. I'd like to see the receipt for where they got it from. Who did they buy it from? Did they buy it from God? Did they steal it off of?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's all very well. Norman, William the Conqueror, rather, with the Normans coming over in 1066 and saying, right, okay, this is our land, not realizing that there were, well, obviously realizing and taking it from Harold and the Saxons, who also had taken it from, go back to the Neolithics, go back to the wanderers who were picking berries and herding whatever. Who actually can say they own the land? They're only sort of administering it by force, and
Exactly.
nobody's owned it. The Bronze Age people didn't manage to buy it from the Iron Age people, or vice versa, whichever way around. It says, "Can I see your receipt?" Oh, you've got it in a different type of metal. That's nice. So, nobody can own it really. They can only, with threats of menaces, tell you that they own it and try and get you to do as they want. They do their bidding.
That's exactly the point. So I don't believe they do own it. I do believe that they justify that they own it, or try to justify that they own it, and I do believe that they then try to set some rules that go around that, which is fine if they can evidence that we have to follow it.
Mm.
And there are a growing number of people that are just going, I don't agree with that. I just don't see the logic in it. I don't. There's even if you just take it on a very simple basis, if common sense has been eliminated in many, many ways, and sometimes just asking simple questions should deliver simple answers. And when you sort of say, well, why do I need to do it? And someone can't answer you, it's because they can't answer you is the logic. And if you realize that they can't answer you correctly, something has to change. Otherwise, you just continue to do the same stupid stuff.
Mm.
And it is a matter of people just starting to go, just to question stuff to start with. But again, many people are scared of questioning stuff because we have the law, we have the legal system, we have the force of the law. Now, that force of the law is in theory people that are supposed to be paid for by us to protect us, police, for example, army. But are they? When we go around, we actually do a sort of a series of presentations explaining what our plan is. And one of those things is we highlight a few people that are talking about things that's affecting our lives. And if you look on the British government's website, back in June 2019, there's a page, and it's still there. You can see, they might take it down after this if they hear about it. But it's actually preparations for the fourth industrial revolution, and it's on the British government's website. Now, if you look at the origins of that, it actually leads back to a book written by Klaus Schwab, who's the leader of the World Economic Forum, which are part of the United Nations. And if you look into the UN 2030 sort of agenda, and that's what a lot of people are aware of as heading to this 2030 thing, that's the UN's agenda, which is sort of trumpeted by someone like the WEF, which you've got someone like Klaus Schwab running around saying we've infiltrated governments and various bits and pieces. Our leaders that we have at the moment are often members, many of them are members of the World Economic Forum. And actually, one of the key parts to being in power in any country is you're not supposed to align yourself with any other third-party entity, because that third-party entity could influence you in a way where you may not then do the best interest of the people, which is what you're there to represent. So you've got people like the leader of the country saying that they are party to that and are all over their website. And then you've got, for example, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I think it's something Sanders, who is the chief of all army forces, well, the military forces, was on a Sky News interview back in September last year, was talking about us having ground troops on the ground in Western Europe by the end of last year. And one of the parts he stated within it, he said, and we're going to do this in line with the fourth industrial revolution. And you sort of think, hold on, you're here to protect the people.
Mm.
And you're quoting the fourth industrial revolution, which is on the British government's website, which comes from Klaus Schwab, which is a book that sort of contains the story of you will own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, there's very few people that I've met that I've had a conversation with that like the idea of owning nothing and being happy about it.
Mm.
So all of these things shouldn't be knitted together by somebody that is, in theory, there to represent us. And that sort of leads you down a path of what do you do if they're not listening and they're not going to do anything and the people you can trust can't be trusted. So we are effectively rebuilding everything with the Republic of England. And a year ago today, we literally relaunched England in a format that fits what they want a country to look like. And we are sort of trying to encourage people to really think through what set of rules as a community would they like to follow. And it's not about being revolutionary. I've been accused of treason and sedition and all sorts of stuff. I'm not trying to replace them. We're not trying to replace anything that's out there. We are simply saying you can play your make believe games over there, but we don't have to follow it unless
Mm.
you prove that we do. And we're going to do our thing over here, and we're not going to bother you. Don't bother us. But this land that we stand on belongs to us all. And if you look at places like Australia and America and places that the United Kingdom have invaded, every person that comes from that country, the Aboriginals, the Maoris, all these sort of things, have indigenous population sort of rules where they go, because you came from here, we'll give you different benefits because this is your land.
Yes.
We don't actually have that here, and we're in theory older than they are. But yet, someone that has 3 or 4 generations of family in the ground should probably have a similar set of rules that says, well, we don't have to answer to anybody. This is our home.
Mm.
And that's the thing is I think that if enough people suddenly go, well, this is my home and not your house, but this piece of land is your home. And then think, if someone comes into your home saying, well, repaint the walls and change this and do that, you'd be like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. But we are allowing that to happen in what is our home. And
Yeah.
for us needs to stop.
So it's kind of like it's like the government and all authority and the crown and the judges and the legislation is like one big circus tent that has come and been shoved up on an island, and it's a massive circus tent that's encompassed everyone, and we've all been encouraged to watch the show or be part of the show, and so you have to have that custard pie in your face whether you like it or not. And actually you're sort of saying, well, actually this bit of area that you're playing, it's fine, you do your show over there, but whilst we're here we don't want this circus tent over us. We've got our own circus tent. It's a different show, thanks very much. This is how we do things. So do your custard pies over there and we'll do our minstrel show, whatever it is, elsewhere. He says, putting it into a very strange allegory
This goes
there.
back to the common sense thing. I mean, humans are pretty much the only creature on the planet that has to pay to be here. If you look at
Yeah,
it, a lion wanders around, goes, "I'm peckish and I'm going to eat what I like and do what I want." Yet we're told from birth, this is the rules, and you must do this. Why must we do it? And actually, people often say, "Well, oh, you're gonna lead to the anarchy." It's ridiculous because actually anarchy comes about because people are struggling. You would have, if people weren't struggling and they're struggling because of fake money systems and a whole bunch of rules that puts them in a place where their lives are difficult,
mm,
they feel the need to do things to basically improve it. Ultimately, if you actually look at it, the resources in the ground should belong to everyone, but yet they're controlled, they're overpriced, everything is manipulated to the point where it makes life difficult. Yet, in theory, if you're wandering around in a with a blank piece of paper, actually, food grows on trees. Everything is really easy to get to. We have a scenario where water falls out of the sky into infrastructure that the people probably paid for to build. It's often polluted with poisons that people tell you through media manipulation that it's good for you to have this stuff, and then we're charged a fortune for it because someone's bought the rights to tell you.
yeah,
All of that's a mess. Nature, natural law, and I think Pete Stone covered this. I mean, anything, any law is made up by someone. apart from the ones that aren't. So if you put your hand in a fire and you go, "What's a bit warm?" That's the ones that you go, that's the
Yeah.
law. Jump out of a second-story building and see if you can fly. That's the laws of nature. Everything else has been made up by somebody else who's decided the rules. And actually, that should be a collective of the people. And if the people are unhappy with those rules, why follow them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's handy to have rules, a system, and I suppose we wouldn't be questioning this system, even if it's a false system. If it worked for the benefit of everybody, if the government did seem benevolent and was benevolent and actually made life as what they ought to, or what a collective of people would expect them to do, and that is not to be herding them into 15-minute cities or telling them how the money is going to be organised in the central bank, or forcing people. I mean, everyone should have that choice. If they want to do it, that's great, no problem. But if the system is rotten and people are unhappy with it, instead of just, as you said earlier, writing to your MP and saying, please, please, I'm begging you, can you change it? It's, to me, it's like, well, we should take back the responsibility and just make them irrelevant because they're no longer working for us, and we just go and do our own thing. And, oh, you've come in a fancy dress outfit and you're telling me you want to take my things or put me in prison. It's a nice game, but no thanks, mate. And the more people that understand that that's a possibility, suddenly the power shifts away from them to the collective of the people doing their, just living and enjoying life, which is clearly why we are here, to get as much benefit out of life and enjoy it and have social, instead of being having a penal system that is there, as you say, you're charged the minute you're born.
Yeah, and obviously you've had recent run-in with censorship, which again is censorship never leads to a great place. When someone's trying to stop you from saying what you believe, that's again someone telling you what to do. Ultimately everyone's entitled to their opinion. If that opinion harms someone in some way, then maybe there should be a rule around that. But again, that comes back to some simple rules. We actually have, I think, in the United Kingdom, something about 9.5 million acts and statutes on the legislation. These are the rules, if you like, but they're rules that just don't make any sense sometimes. And there is one that we often highlight called the Cancer Act. Now, if anybody looks into it, it was actually brought out, and this is a supposed law, that just before the Second World War, they brought out a law that makes it a criminal offence to suggest that you may have found a cure for cancer. Now, if you think about that, that's just completely illogical. Why would it be a criminal offence? Now, I understand that somebody suggesting they can do something that they can't do could be dangerous, but to actually make it a criminal offence for anyone to do so, and there are cases of people that have actually been put in prison for many, many years for having proved that they've actually improved people's positions. And
And
again,
why just that one disease? Why not? I've cured headaches,
well,
or I've cured how to get rid of a thorn. I mean, whatever. It seems very strange that it would be this, which of course is a big, big problem for people, but this one particular disease that is against the law, and it makes no sense that you shouldn't be doing it for anything. If you don't know, if you haven't got the solution and it's bad, and people turn around and say, actually, it's a load of old rubbish. Oh, okay, fair enough, I'll try something else. But to make it illegal is a nonsense, unless there's an ulterior motive, of course.
well, I actually recently met he is still a doctor, but he was a very high profile doctor who was in that space, who had been dragged out of his bed in the middle of the night, and his wife, for having helped people. And he was explaining to me the cost that the NHS, for example, which is one of the only organisations that are allowed to suggest that they have cures for cancer or fixes for it. And the NHS is actually billed around about £800,000 per client that goes through their current processes of chemotherapy and various bits and pieces. So if you think about it, it's a very big money making exercise to get somebody onto the system that they believe is the
Mm.
fix. So again, this comes back to the having to look at everything. It's not just does England exist? It's like, what's the rules that we're playing with? And there's so much, unfortunately, it's just rotten to the core. We believe that we have leaders that you can take one out and replace them with another lot, and it's two sides of the same coin. They're just all
Mm.
playing the same drum, banging the drum of the likes of the UN and the World Economic Forum and people like the World Health Organization, which are now supposedly trying to take control of our sort of health and God knows what else. All of these organizations are corporations no different from, Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, McDonald's, and have no more power than they do. And yet they are making rules and we're supposed to just follow them. But as I say, there's a huge number of people that are looking and going, I'm not comfortable with that. And what do I do about it? And again, they look for solutions, but trying to find a solution that makes sense. For 5 or 6 years, I've been saying to people that the banking system is going to collapse. I sort of went through 10 years of the annual accounts of the banks, and when they're in a monumental mess. And almost every time I say to somebody the banking system is going to collapse, most people's instant response to me is, which bank should I put my money in?
Yeah.
You're like, the whole thing's broken. And if you say to someone, the system that we have is broken, most people want a system that looks a bit like the system that they've got. Or people do the complete opposite. And that's sometimes a bit silly because that's doing the polar opposite just for the sake of it. That's going
Mm.
left, right. Whereas actually what we think we have isn't such a bad idea if we actually had it. This comes back to what is a constitutional monarchy? What is a constitutional republic? That's where the people make up a set of rules, put them down on paper, and say, let's follow that. And the government don't get to change it. They do change it at the moment. They make the rules, they start enforcing those. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So actually, we just need to go back to basics and do what has been done in the past, but actually make sure that that is stuck to like glue. And if we all did that, half the problems we've got would evaporate overnight.
We are in an interesting time, and I've said this numerous times in my various interviews or on my monologues and things, is that I've never known a time in which now we're faced with all these things that we are actually beginning to question it all. I think in many ways, although there has been some dreadful things happening, particularly during the pandemic and various things, that actually this is a bit of a godsend in a way, because I think we are slowly realizing that the system that we've got now is rotten and that there are alternatives. And it may take some time for the majority of people to realize this and understand. But I've never known a time in which having the means, to communicate the way we can through all these video platforms and social media, where we can express these ideas. And yes, I've been cancelled on YouTube, and I don't, it's funny you should say that, because I don't mind the fact that YouTube say we've cancelled you because you've breached our terms and conditions. I don't mind they have their terms and conditions, and if you mention this various things, you can't come on our platform. That bit I don't mind, if those terms and conditions were not some vague, not unknown sort of mystical area. If you said, whatever you do, don't talk about the weather. If you talk about the weather, you can't come, and you go, okay, I can do anything else but not talk about the weather. But when it's like, well, if you insinuate this and you maybe... But going back to my main thrust here is, do you feel that we are on that tipping point now where people are waking up, that we are looking for alternatives, that the way the government's tyrannical approach to so many things that people haven't asked for is slowly waking people up to think, actually, we didn't ask for this, we don't want it, what are we going to do about it? And are people looking for things like the Republic of England to reset their lives?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think that there are a number of people going, I'm not comfortable with it, but they just often feel, humans are sort of, are creatures of sort of packs, comfort. It's all well and good us all realizing that it's a mess, but if you stand on your own 2 feet and try and do something about it, it's a very lonely path to tread.
Mm.
And it's finding something that everyone can get behind, where you go, okay, right, that feels like me, and we feel like going. Our home is the thing to get behind. Go, okay, well, this is actually our house, and we want to all have a say in the way that it's run. And actually, we actually have a problem at the moment of trying to get enough people to find a particular thing and think that's the way to go with it. And I look at the people that do this to us as very organized, and they treat us like we're really stupid.
Mm.
They do the whole hands, face, space, build back better, three-letter words and lots of simple messaging. But we don't do the same thing back. We've all started to realize that there's something wrong, and everybody wants to sort of share that information. And so we're like, guess what I found out? And I know this and this and this. And people then often look at you and go, well, you sound like a raving lunatic.
Yeah. Oh,
You've got
yeah.
mad. And we've got to learn to sort of do what they do to us in a way, because then you'll get the message across. Um, and
Well, I said that. I said that about 2 months ago. I said, the Build Back Better, the all of that. I said, why are we not using these three-word messages, not against them, but for us, like cash is king, or use more cash, or we are free. These sort of things. And I did think that if we could get all the truth sayers, as it were, on YouTube and all these different platforms to have the same number of messages, and we all were saying it, so not everyone's watching any one show, but collectively the same impact is coming and waking people up and thinking, oh yeah, for the moment cash is king, or whatever it is, or find a new currency, whatever the words would be, that as you say, that organization of getting everybody, the problem is everybody, as you alluded to before, have got their little niche of the problem, and are looking to do that. Another idea I thought was, if you had a central, like a web page, that's not trying to govern anybody, but says if all the independent people kind of put their piece on this one place, so people went to see what everybody else is doing, but also YouTubers like me could see, oh, they're going to be talking about this next week. That's a good idea. I'll talk about it as well, to reinforce it, so that this it had no administration and no bias or anything like. Just said, oh, Vobes is going to be talking about this next week, so other people go, that's a good point, yeah, we'll all do that, and the message then became stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started building a community called In One Place. Our website is inoneplace.com, and we have a sort of like a YouTube equivalent, a Facebook equivalent, a messaging system. And within it, I mean, we don't use algorithms, we don't track anything, we don't censor anything. So we're trying to create a community, if you like, where people can go there, put their stuff, and things won't get banned. But if on the messaging side of things, we've been, I do a lot of sort of online training things, and within those messages, we've developed a few 3 and 4 letter words, things like all tax is voluntary, which is always a good
That's a good one,
concept,
yeah.
and banks don't lend money. And I was actually having a chat with Pete Stone the other day, and he's come up with one which is, where's the contract?
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
that's a good one, because again, when they come to you saying you must do this or you must do that, is where's the contract? But there's also the re-education side of things. Unfortunately, we've all gone through an education where we've learned certain things, and certain words mean certain things, and we actually don't look even at the detail. I'd had a run in, obviously, this will go on YouTube, so I'll be very careful not to get you into trouble with them. But I'd had a couple of
Famous
runs
last words.
with Google a few years ago, and I got thrown out of their head office in London, being told that they weren't there. And yeah, I was like, well, funny that, because I'm, everywhere on the internet says this is your European head office, and they went, no, Google are not in this office, and I was asked to leave the building. And I'd gone in there to try and speak to their legal department. And I've had a bit of a gripe with Google ever since, because I just don't think they are what we believe or what we're told they are. And the reality is that if you look at it, if you only just do another one of our 3 letter words is, did you know? And if you just do a little bit of research, sometimes you can lead yourself down a path where you go, "Oh my God!" And there's one that I've been doing recently, and I'll let people do a little bit of research that we don't upset anybody. But if you look at Google, they have a browser which many people know is called Google Chrome, but many people don't know the name of the Android operating system. So if you actually ask people what the operating system for an Apple phone is, most people will say it's iOS, but most people have no idea what the operating system is in an Android phone. Often people think it's Linux and various bits and pieces, but it's not. And even if you Google it, you'll find it. It's an interesting thing. So bearing in mind that their browser is called Chrome, look up what their operating system is for Android, and it will lead you down a path where you go, "Oh, okay, that's very in your face," and I didn't know that that was the situation. And sometimes it just takes a little trigger to snap some people that are sort of just haven't caught on to it or don't think that we actually have a problem. There are many people that just go, "Oh, it's not that bad," and what can I do about it? But if you look at it, if every single person has that attitude, what can I do? Then nothing is the answer. But if we all go, what can we do? And the first thing we all do is go, well, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. And on the same day, we all just do that. Then the people that have been doing these things to us are going to have a big problem on their plate. And that
Mm.
is revolution. That's simply asking questions. It's being polite.
Yeah.
My parents taught me manners, but say please and thank you and ask questions. I'm like a child again. I'm like, why is the sky blue and why is the grass green and why do I need to do this? And when someone says because I say so, I say, well, that's lovely, and I'll go with it. You've got the power, but I've read your rules. So if, for example, you look up the law, there's legal definitions of things, there's English dictionary definitions of things, there's judicial dictionary definitions of things. And if you look up the word slave, for example, in any context, you will find it is somebody that doesn't have a choice. And if you read the Modern Slavery Act, it actually states in there that to treat somebody like a slave or hold them in servitude is a criminal offence for which you could serve up to life imprisonment for treating somebody like a slave. So when someone says to you, you have to do something, and you say, well, do I have a choice? And they say no, the minute they commit to writing that they individually in that corporation have told you you don't have a choice, that's actually servitude and slavery, which is a breach of the Modern Slavery Act, which is their rules. So actually, sometimes just understanding very simple solutions to very big problems is the way to change this. And once people are empowered to realize that they don't have to do as they're told, and that's not just being rebellious, it's just simply going, I'm free.
Yes.
I'm free to make my own decisions, and I don't like your choice. And if someone come along and said you must eat this, you'd be like, but I don't like it. And if they say, but you must eat it, be like, well, hold on, who are you to tell me
Yeah, exactly.
eat that food? But yet we take some other things in the same context and go, oh, okay, I'll do as I'm told. So it doesn't have to be that way. We just simply just have to have a scenario where enough people just go, well, I prefer those rules to these ones. And if you're party to making those rules, well, that's basically a constitutional republic. And that's basically what we've built.
So they are, ladies and gentlemen. England doesn't exist, but it did, and it will do again, by the sounds of it. Jason, it's been a fascinating conversation. And so, where can people find out more? You mentioned In One Place as a platform that people can, presumably in the same way as all these other ones, join up and put their content on and all of that. Is that true? Is that right?
Yes, yeah, it's been going for about 7, 8 years. We're ironically pushing a brand new version, which we've been working on for about 9 months this weekend. So from next week, there's going to be a whole new generation of it. So it's very interactive. It's called In One Place for a good reason because everything you need is in one place. But ultimately, there's no algorithms, there's no tracking, there's nothing censoring anybody. So all content is welcome. That's my own thing that I've been working on, my day job, if you like. But in addition to that, the Republic of England is the republicofengland.com. The Awareness Foundation, which is something else that I've been involved in for a few years, is awareness.foundation. So, there's content in all of these places that sort of all lead down a similar path and start to teach people that people telling you what to do and telling you how to do it, it isn't really freedom. There's a lot of people in the sort of that have discovered common law over the last couple of years as well, and people go, oh, common law is the way to go. But for me, common law is even made up. So really, there's free or not free. There's your starting point.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
you
with
have to
the
ask.
common law and natural law and God's law and all these things, people have often say to me, Richard, this sounds brilliant, but how do we implement it? How do I say that to a policeman who's about to take my car away? And it's like, yeah, okay, I get that. So, but the more we educate ourselves, the more we have empowered ourselves to be able to know the best way to approach all these difficult situations. I'll put the links in the description, of course. So I hope people will check that out. Jason, thank you so much for chatting to me and telling us about that. It sounds really exciting. We're going to, I think the next few years are going to be absolute fascinating moments in history. We've been living through this turbulent time, and I think a huge amount of change is going to happen. It may not be easy, but I think we are going to get there. And this sort of conversation is going to go on and on and on. So thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. I will be back again with more interviews, of course, hopefully on YouTube, but all other platforms and potentially in one place as well. So do check it all out. But meanwhile, from Jason and I, thanks for watching and goodbye.